Good evening, everybody. My name's Alistair Humphreys, and welcome to the Cotswold Outdoor Facebook page. Tonight, I am going to be having a chat, although it seems weird to be chatting when I'm sitting on my own in a shed, but I'm going to be talking about adventures, large and small, micro adventures, planning them, what you're getting up to at this strange time for all of us. So, I'm an adventurer at heart. I write books and make films and do podcasts and adventure type stuff here in my shed. And I'm also currently locked down like everyone else and trying to find ways to get my fix of the outdoors and adventure and exercise and freedom and nature. All these good things. How can we do this at this very strange time? So, if you have any questions, please put them in the comment box. I'll try and answer as many of those as possible. I hope it's working. I'm a bit rubbish at this. I'm in fact far better than Facebook Live. I'm much better at dyeing my hair. Do you like my hair? This is a sign of how long we've been locked down, because week 1 of lockdown I got so bored I shaved my head bald as an egg. It's now returning and I'm dyed my hair blue-ish. But you're not here to hear about my styling tips. We're here to find out about adventures. So, I've been given a list of questions to start off with. Question 1. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? I started my adventure life, like a lot of people, as a young guy, just desperate to go see the world and have as many adventures as possible and go off to far off lands. And the way I decided to do that was by bicycle. I have still not found any better way to explore either locally or across continents than by climbing onto a bicycle, shoving your tent, strapping onto the back and pedaling away to see how far you can get. Good to see that the comments are working, because we got the first question in from a very important subject. Thank you, Matt, who wants to know, can you tell me what shade of blue my hair is? Well, in theory, according to the bottle, it was Atlantic blue, but I'm not quite sure. Is that Atlantic blue? But I hope you like it, Matt. I highly recommend a bit of a hair dye. Apparently it's going to last for 6 to 8 weeks, so who knows. So I spent 4 years cycling around the world, a journey of 46,000 miles, 72,000 kilometers. Took me over 4 years to complete, and I crossed the oceans by boat. I lived pretty much like a vagabond, sleeping by the side of the road, eating banana sandwiches, living cheap, and I did therefore the whole journey around the world for 4 years in just under £7,000, which is pretty cheap for a 4-year long journey like that. I came back from that trip. I then spent the next number of years, 10 years or so, trying to chase big adventures, trying to do big expeditions, rowing the Atlantic, walking from coast to coast across southern India, crossing Iceland by foot and pack raft, went up to the Arctic a couple of times, up onto the Arctic Ocean, an expedition in Greenland. What else did I do? Oh, crossed the empty quarter desert. You see a picture of me up on the roof from the Sheffield Film Festival, crossing the empty quarter desert with Leon McCarran, and just doing general sorts of adventures like that. And then over time I moved from doing big adventures to ever smaller adventures, which I've come to call micro adventures. And micro adventures are mostly what I'm going to be talking about and answering questions about this evening. Question 2. Where did you grow up? I grew up in the Yorkshire Dales, which at the time I just thought was a pretty normal place to grow up in, but looking back I realise with gratitude just how lucky I was there to be able to have a pleasantly feral childhood of running around the hills and playing in rivers, doing a lot of making dams in rivers. That was one of my favourite activities to do with my brother and my couple of friends. Riding our bikes, that sort of stuff, all around the Yorkshire Dales. And it really wasn't, I really though don't feel that I was hugely adventurous as a kid. It was just kind of the normal stuff that I did. There's always a bit of a curse though with things, I find, or perhaps that's just my personality, but growing up in the Yorkshire Dales means that I now have very high standards for what a nice countryside place is, and the places that I took for granted as a kid now feel pretty spectacular. Ooh, questions coming now. Laura Maisie, currently reading through all your books. Well, hopefully they'll keep you busy in lockdown. My Midsummer Morning is perhaps my favourite ever adventure book. Laura, thank you so much. So that is the book I'm the most proud of writing. So I'm glad that you are enjoying that. Question 3. What are you going to be talking about? Well, I'm going to be talking about hair colouring advice. I might talk a little bit about some book suggestions if anyone's looking for some adventure books to keep them busy during lockdown. And mostly, though, I'm going to be talking about micro-adventures. Now, what is a micro-adventure? Good question. I feel that a micro-adventure is just an adventure. And I think that's a fairly stupid word to define anyway, because one person's Everest is another person's weekend walk. So really, if it feels like an adventure to you, then it is an adventure. And that is really all that matters. If you think you're doing an adventure, you are doing an adventure. Don't go measuring it against Bear Grylls or Ben Fogle or Ralph Fiennes. If it's an adventure to you, that is an adventure. And therefore, what is a micro-adventure? Well, that is just a smaller version of an adventure. A short, simple, local, cheap, affordable manifestation of your big dream. And the reason these are relevant, well, pre-coronavirus, the reason these were relevant is because we have a big dream to go cycle around the world, but the reality of life gets in the way, and obviously most people can't disappear for 4 years, and therefore the inclination is perhaps to do nothing. But my argument is that it's always better to do something than to do nothing, and therefore a micro-adventure comes into the equation. To do the smallest little version of your big dream that is compatible with your real life. And now that we are in the glorious age of coronavirus, suddenly most of our dreams and most of our plans are limited. And therefore, I'm sure that most of us in the last few months have been facing this conundrum of thinking, either we can look at all the bad stuff and the things that got in the way and the cancelled plans, the cancelled adventures, and I'm just going to put in a disclaimer now that, of course, talking about adventure during coronavirus feels like a fairly frivolous activity. So I apologise for that tone, and I know that times are way harder than choosing camping equipment for many people. However, I think I'm here tonight to talk about adventure. So we have a choice at the moment to ask ourselves whether we are sad, disappointed, frustrated about all the things we can't do, or we maybe get excited about what we can do. What opportunities do we have now that we didn't have before? For some of you, that might be having far more time than you did before, although perhaps not the geographical range to go explore. So how can you find micro-adventures close to home? Right. Ooh. Someone's saying warm regards from Kenya. Ooh, I wish I was in Kenya now. Lovely. Right. Every person who is lucky enough to be a guest on the Cotswold Outdoor live stream chat gets asked the same 5 questions. Although I bet not all guests have a clipboard as I do. This, I feel, will make me look very intelligent. Question 1. What is your earliest memory of the outdoors? I think it's probably an amalgamation memory in reality of playing in our local river, building a lot of dams on the little local stream, riding my bike around the narrow lanes and hills, and oh yes, well, it was not my first, but I saved up for what felt like an eternity to afford a £130 bright pink mountain bike, which really was not designed to go anywhere near a mountain, and I ragged that thing around the hills and moors of the Yorkshire Dales, and I absolutely loved it. My first big adventure, I suppose, would be doing the Yorkshire Three Peaks, which is a 20-mile challenge. You have to do it in 12 hours, three biggish hills, Pennygent, Whernside and Ingbrook, and my school, I was so lucky really that my school basically frog marched the whole school from the age of 9 round the Three Peaks. So that really got me not only appreciating the warm, satisfying glow of finishing a challenge, but also removed that silly barrier that's often put in place saying, oh, you're too young to do this sort of stuff, which is nonsense. Kids are hardcore. It's us adults that are generally the wimps and the boring ones. Question 2. What is one thing you can't live without? Well, a range of hair care products is essential for me. But I think what lockdown is showing me is just how much I really need in my life. Exercise, movement, and newness, going to new places. That's what I'm really, really missing at the moment, is just going to places I've never been before. And this then comes into the philosophy of Microventure comes in, of me then having the choice between moaning that I can't go to new places versus thinking, okay, what new thing can I find close to home that I've never seen before? Is it possible to be an explorer close to home? And the answer, of course, is yes. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some of the things I've actually been up to in the lockdown in terms of trying to find things close to home I've never seen before. Excuse me, quick cup of coffee. But yeah, I'm really, really missing the freedom for doing proper exercise. Jessica says she can't live without the sea. Yeah, I always think of myself as being a mountains, woods and river person, but in the last couple of months I've been really, really missing the sea. Comments flying in now. My brain is way too small to be able to talk, read things down, and answer. Right, question 3 of the Cotswold 5 questions. What is your favourite podcast, movie and song? Which I think Cotswold are tricking me here, because that seems like 3 questions to me. My favourite podcast, Desert Island Discs, which is relevant more than ever now during lockdown. What 8 pieces of music would you have on your desert island /shed/ wherever you happen to be locked down? What essential luxury item would you take with you, and what book would you take with you? It's such a good podcast. If you've never listened to it, you can search back over 75 years of Desert Island Discs archives on their website and just listen to incredible people sharing the stories of their lives and the music, the soundtrack to their lives. So I go for Desert Island Discs. In terms of adventure, I really like the Tough Girl podcast by mind blank Sarah's the Tough Girl podcast. I really like the Terra Incognita adventure podcast. That's a really good one. It goes quite a lot deeper than a lot of the usual adventure podcasts. And I suppose I would be remiss not to get in this massively shameless plug for my own podcast. Last summer I spent a month cycling around Yorkshire looking for different people's interpretation of what living adventurously meant to them and interviewing people along the way. I was trying to find Sarah Williams' podcast. Thank you very much. I was looking for people, not necessarily famous people, not necessarily adventurers, just people who are trying to live adventurously. And I made a podcast of that, and I loved the experience of recording a podcast series. So please have a listen to my podcast if you fancy it. It's called Living Adventurously, and you'll find it on all the apps and jobbies of your choice. Favourite movie? Favourite movie? It's hard. So many different genres, but I'll try and choose a genre that might be of interest to people listening here, outdoorsy ones. The Barkley Marathons. Have you seen that on Netflix? If you think you're tough or you think you're good at running, go watch the Barkley Marathons. I love these comments. Thank you. Jessica Lamb has just put my podcast in the comments links. This is amazing. This is like having a crack team of assistants. Anyone good at doing tax returns while we're over here? And yeah, Barkley Marathons, highly recommended. Please, someone put up the trailer. That's your next job, please, Jessica Lamb. And also then a film I watched this week, which seemed to get a little bit of dust in my eye, or might have been a little bit of a tear, called Skid Row Marathon. Can you get people whose lives have properly fallen apart and get them to run a marathon? That was I really liked that book. And then a couple of short films on YouTube. It's called Of Fells and Hills. It's a running one from the Lake District, but I find that really moving, and the more I watch it, the more it grabs me. In particular, the final, pretty much near the last line of the film, when Ricky Gates, who actually, there's so many things I need to remember. He inspired one of my lockdown adventures of trying to run every street. So Google Ricky Gates. Someone put his every street challenge in the comments, please, because that is an inspiring local micro adventure you can do close to home during lockdown. Ricky Gates went running in the Lake District, and at the end of this little film he realises that he's quite envious of these people who've just chosen to explore locally rather than him running all around the world. People who are just running close to home, and he says something along the lines of, he realises that one small range of hills is enough for any lifetime if you just explore deep enough. I like that very much. Jessica's put up the Barkley Marathons link. Thank you, Jessica. That is brilliant. Next task is the Of Fells and Hills YouTube link, please. And by the way, if you don't have to do these, but thank you. Oh no, you've been beaten to it. Sorry, Jessica, you're sacked. Wayne Norman has done that one. I should also, seeing as we're talking about movies, it would be remiss of me not to suggest a couple of films I've made which you might enjoy as time fillers in lockdown. Into the Empty Quarter is on YouTube, which is about me walking 1,000 miles through the Empty Quarter desert, pulling the worst designed car in history. I can say it was the worst designed car in history because I designed it. And then a film on YouTube called My Midsummer Morning, which is 20 minutes long, about me playing the violin incredibly badly through Spain, following in the footsteps of Laurie Lee. A lot of my adventures have been inspired either directly or indirectly by reading books. I think that's a really good thing to do at this time now, is to find a book that talks about stuff near to where you happen to live, a book you enjoy about things near to you, and then use the places in that book as an excuse to come up with a micro-adventure. Question here from Juliet saying, I'm looking for a micro-adventure in West Dorset with young kids. Can you help? I'm afraid I'm terrible on Dorset, so if anyone can help Juliet with planning a micro-adventure in Dorset, please give her an idea in the comments. Laura in the comments has posted Ricky. Oh man, this is exhausting. Ricky Gates is Run Every Street challenge, in which he ran every street in San Francisco, and I really liked that challenge, and I followed along with it, and I've read stuff about it online, and I thought, yeah, that's quite cool. Only now do I realise just how epically hard it is. I decided during lockdown to start exploring from my front door and running every single street, down the dead ends, the cul-de-sacs, seeing if I could find new places close to home. This sort of feeling of completism to build up a challenge and some exploration and adventure close to home. To my astonishment / horror, I found a street less than 400 metres from my home, which I didn't even know existed in about a decade. So I was sort of half mortified at my ineptness and half excited that it proved the point that you can explore anywhere. If you're interested in doing this every street challenge, which I really recommend, I did it by using the Strava app and then linking it up to a website called heatflask.com. Mike Soden, you're one of my minions. Please find the website heatflask.com, put that up in the comments, and it's a really good way of trying to tick off all the streets, and a really, really, really good local adventure, which you can either do running the streets, or I've now sort of run as far as I can in the times that I'm sort of allowed to be out and running. So I'm now trying to run every single footpath close to where I am. I still haven't answered these 5 questions. This is a nightmare. I'm very sorry, Cotswold Outdoor. My favourite song. Oh, I can answer that simply. And when I decided to walk across Spain, there was one song I thought I need to be able to play. Thunder Road by Bruce Springsteen. It's definitely the song of my life, and I imagine myself standing in these town plazas in Spain playing Thunder Road. It'd be amazing, and money would be just flowing into my money box, and all the women would be swooning at my feet, and all the men would be so jealous of me. But I'm so inept that it's actually way out of my skill level. But yeah, that I would choose as my song. Yeah, if you're ready to take that long walk from your front porch to my front seat, that's all you need. Take the small step from the front door to the front seat, and the adventure can begin. Thank you very much, Mike, for putting heatflask.com up there, so we can now all get out and explore really locally and close to home. Oh man, I'm exhausted. This is like this crazy monologue to myself in a slightly overheated shed, watched by people on the internet. When you're not outdoors, how are you spending your free time? Well, back in the olden days of February, my dream way of spending time not outdoors would be having gone on a massive run so that I'm knackered, earning the right to sit on the sofa and then lying there watching live sport. My favourite thing to do, I treat myself once a year to one day at a test match, cricket match. So watching live sport, football, rugby, I scream at the TV ridiculously loudly. And then I spend a lot of my time reading books and reading lots of travel books. I love, this is just hilarious. Well, sorry, I'm finding it hilarious. Thank you, Jessica, for putting up Bruce Springsteen in the comments. How would you describe your relationship with the outdoors? I've been heavily in love with the outdoors for decades now, but only in lockdown. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. I realised just how essential the outdoors and wild places feels to my life, to my physical health, my mental well-being. I find being in the outdoors calming, simultaneously calming and uplifting, joyful, thrilling, and also calming and simplifying. And one thing I'm becoming increasingly aware of is that I'm hoping my relationship to the outdoors is not a parasitic one. The problem with all of us who enjoy the outdoors is that almost by definition we're pretty much wrecking the places we love, either by flying there, travelling there, buying rubbish stuff that we don't need and then throwing it away, or erosion, or just leaving rubbish behind. And I'm trying to learn to be not a parasitic outdoors person, to do my best to be beneficial to the outdoors, but at least to be just not trash it. That's feeling increasingly important to me. Yes. Right. Good question. Couple of good questions come in here. One, what are your favourite shorts in the outdoors? Well, I'm fairly relaxed pretty much on outdoor gear, in that I think when you begin, particularly for Microventures, the main thing to do is just go out there and do stuff. Just do stuff in whatever you wear to go to the shops or whatever you used to wear to go to the gym. Get out there and do stuff. You can go walking, you can do all sorts of just normal stuff. Later on, once you learn that you really love some sort of activity, that's when the appreciation for really good gear comes in. And having done enough practice in rubbish kit to know precisely what you want, and therefore to buy appropriately so that what you buy will last you for years to come, and therefore it's worth spending the money on the most expensive gear you can get in that niche, because it'll pay you well and last a long time. So shorts, well, this is what I'm definitely not here for is fashion advice. When I'm traveling on a long bike trip or crossing a desert, something like that, I really like zip off trousers, because you can have trousers, turn them into shorts without needing to bother carrying the excess weight of double bits of clothing. Walking, I think I quite like the sort of knee-length, proper hiking-y shorts. They're suitably stretchy. So you can do a good. Oh, look, I've got a good pair of shorts in there. Good stretch. Good, plenty of pockets in them. Nice, quick drying. Also, you need quite a good adjustable belt thing, because sometimes you need it quite loose when you're just chilling on your Facebook Live, and sometimes when you're yomping up a hill, you need to do it quite tight so they don't fall down. So, I quite like specialist hiking shorts. Fashion advice from the man in blue hair. Right. Favourite meal in the outdoors. Hunger is the best sauce. If you get yourself sufficiently hungry, everything tastes great. I learnt a wonderful piece of travel advice recently in a book from a guy called Brendan Leonard. He's got a very good newsletter, by the way, if you like the outdoors. Put that in the comments, please, someone. Thank you. Chop, chop. Brendan Leonard has a newsletter called Semi-Rad. He's American. I like his sense of humour. But he has this brilliant theory that when you're out on an adventure, you should always eat your most delicious food first, which is totally not what I've always done. I've always tried to save something nice. But his theory is, if you eat your most delicious food now, then when you come to eat the food next time, you eat the most delicious food. And so it continues until you're down to the most terrible thing in your pack, by which time you've been on the adventure for so long that you're starving, and that tastes good anywhere. We all know, of course, that actually the best food for adventuring are banana sandwiches. Lynn Vanderloo started a Microventure group. You sound like you might be from Belgium? Or maybe you've just got a cool name. Anyway, the more microventure groups, the better. Julie, thank you. Semirad.com is up there. By the way, if you're interested in microventures, look on Facebook, Google microventure in your county. There are over 40 different microventure Facebook groups, and hopefully after lockdown, some of them can burst back into life. Can you cook anything cool over a fire? Cooking on fires are great. Simplest thing on a fire, get yourself a massive potato, shove it in the embers, no foil, nothing like that. Just leave it there you leave it there for as long as you want. It'll happily cook away. They're virtually nuclear proof and indestructible. And when you're really hungry later on, you've got your jacket potatoes done. Holland, Netherlands, welcome, Lynn. So, what else is good in a fire? Oh man, everything tastes good in a fire, doesn't it? I have a thing. It's totally impractical, called a poikie. It's like a Dutch oven. It's a ridiculously massive, very heavy cauldron with 3 legs. If you put a load of stuff in there, pour in half a bottle of red wine, shove it in a fire for a few hours, that tastes incredible. So if you've got a sort of garden where you cook on fires, I can highly recommend a poikie, which Lynn, in her best Dutch, can spell for us. It's an Afrikaans word, but get yourself a poikie if you're into cooking at home. A week or so ago, actually, I went to collect some wild garlic. So actually, you're not too late for that. If you live near any woods with some wild garlic, go get some wild garlic, blitz it up, make your own pesto, shove it on top of a homemade pizza, put it on Instagram, and your smugness will win the internet. So wild garlic is a fantastic thing to get. And actually, I was going to talk about a way of trying to find, trying to get more enjoyment out of fewer places we can go at the moment, is to learn a little bit about foraging. So trying to find wild food near to where you live that you can forage really opens your eyes up to the opportunities that are close to home. So you can Google galore on this sort of stuff. There's it's called Food You Can Forage by Tiffany Francis. If you live in the city, I've got this book called Lost in London, which is all about nature and trees and wildlife and stuff in the city, but it's also got a section about foraged food within the city. So that's a good thing to do, to just try and become more adventurous, more curious. I think that given that we can't really go anywhere at the moment, curiosity is the key thing to trying to really go deep on that. And one of the best things I've found for that is an app I only just discovered it. It's an app called Seek by iNaturalist, and it's amazing. You take a camera, take account, you zap it at things and it identifies things, and I have just got obsessed now with getting down and pointing it at leaves and fungi and all sorts of things I had absolutely no ideas about. So yeah, that's a really good thing to do, is to just start to forage a bit, to get that app and get curious. I can't even remember what the question was now. This is ridiculously exhausting. Right, now we get onto the bit where, so that was meant to be my brief introduction. I've done 30 minutes, Microventures. I'm now about to start that. By the way, I'm going to melt in 15 minutes, so you've only got 15 more minutes of this to endure, and then we can all go have our tea. Please, if you've got any questions, by the way, about Microventures, planning adventures, stick them in the comments and we'll get onto those. So, short, simple, local microadventures. What's some memorable ones? Well, my first microadventure really was walking a lap of the M25, the motorway around London, which is actually these days, in my mind, counts as the epic scale of micro. It took a week to do, but my big epiphany during walking around the M25 was realising that in so many ways that silly, comedy, daft adventure felt very much like cycling around the world. It was a physical challenge. It took me places I'd never been before. I met interesting people, and also there were wild places everywhere. If you stop seeing all the towns and the horrible bits and the roads and instead see the negative spaces in between, you start to see that there are little pockets of wilderness and wildness everywhere. So that started to get me thinking about that. And then what I've really started to do since then is just I've become a bit of a map geek. You see the walls in my shed behind are wallpapered with all the Ordnance Survey maps I used when I was writing my Microadventures book. Ooh, there's an excuse for a quick plug. Microadventures book. Or if you're watching this in South Korea, Microadventures book, which to my great amusement they put some other English bloke on the front cover, not me. I started just using maps. So what I do is I just get a map and I look at it and I just think, oh, I wonder if I went from there to there, what that might be like. Or I try and find places like somewhere beginning with A, somewhere beginning with Z, and go from one to the other. In short, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you come up with some objective that is sufficiently piques your curiosity to get you out the front door. So for example, over the last few nights, I've been trying to work out a way to get off-road from my house to a friend's house, but I can only do it late at night. So I've had to set off and race till it gets dark and come back home. And each night I've been getting a little bit further, exploring footpaths I haven't seen before, really relatively close to where I am. And on that point, one of the best microadventures that we can all do, which I really enjoyed in this book, was called A Journey Around My Home. So pick a radius of a circle. You can do the maths calculations in your homeschooling in the morning, and work out a radius of a circle that you want to do, and just go do a journey around your home. And you could repeat it tomorrow 100 meters further out and you would see an entirely new world. So I really would encourage you to go do a journey around your home, explore different radii, and you'll find places you've never seen before. Tony says, did you camp around the M25? Yeah, I did. I'm a big fan of wild camping in a bivvy bag, finding a little bit of woodland where there's no one around, no one will find you, you're not going to bother anyone, you're leaving no trace, and arrive late, leave early, no one minds, no one knows. Peaceful, lovely thing. So yeah, a bivvy bag is a great entry ticket into adventuring once we're allowed to get out camping again. Greg asks, how did you find the various people to chat to for the podcast? I asked on Twitter. Twitter's been an amazing thing for me over the years of just asking questions. Hey, anyone know anyone in Yorkshire who's really interesting but not famous? And I found people from doing that. Oh man, again, I forgot to answer these questions. Any books or guides to suggest? Well, funny you should mention it. Here's a good book. I've talked about that one. Where's my other book? Oh yeah. So what I would do is get yourself from your charity shop a local Ordnance Survey map from where you live. up on this wall of my shed here, I've pasted together from eBay various old Ordnance Survey maps of where I live, and when you can see it like that, adventure ideas just start to leap out at you when it's spread out like that. So that's one good way of planning things. Jessica Lamb, you are hired. There's a great website called 2kilometersfromhome.com, which will calculate you that radius away from home. There's another really good one called Travel Time Platform. It shows you places you can drive to within a chunk of time, which helps you, or cycle to, or take the train to, which helps you find places to go and explore. So buy yourself a map, and not just scrolling around your phone. You need a big open map to start to visualize ideas. This is good if you live in London, the London National Park City Map. Sorry, I really apologise now for this being a London-centric few minutes. Someone just needs to make more of these. Great Trees of London maps. Someone needs to make those for every city in the world. Sorry, more London things. The Tree Climber's Guide if you're in London. Actually, wherever you are, go climb a tree. This is another thing I've been doing a lot of during lockdown and beyond, is climbing the same tree at regular intervals. It's simple, it's cheap, free, it gives you a bit of excitement, a bit of exercise, it slows you down, gives you a bit of simplicity, a glimpse into the natural world and noticing how the seasons are moving on. There's no situation in life that is not improved by climbing a tree and having a cup of tea up there. And also, wherever you live, go climb a hill. Like if you live in Milton Keynes, go climb the highest hill in Milton Keynes, or London, go climb the highest peaks in London, wherever you live. If you live in whatever county you're in, you can, oh man, that's exhausting. Whatever county you're in, you can find the highest point in the county, go sleep there in your bivvy bag, and then travel to the lowest point in your county. And the good thing about coming up with obscure ideas like this is that it doesn't mean that you go to the honeypots where everyone else is going. In fact, quite the opposite. The more random your mission, the more certain you are to have it to yourself. So my running every street mission that I've been doing, my climbing the same tree regularly, my trying to cycle to my friend's house mission, I never see anyone doing these things. And I live in a boringly built up part of the world. So just using some imagination to just go somewhere random is great. Advice for bivvy bags, the Alp Kits bivvy bag I highly recommend. If you want a tarpaulin to go over it for sleeping, or if you want to try sleeping in your garden for the first time during lockdown, you can get really expensive tarps if you want, and I highly recommend buying them at Cotswold Outdoors. But equally, you can go to your local pound shop and get a massive tarpaulin, a couple of bungees, some tent pegs, and rig it up in a sort of sloping thing. If you look on my website, there's a article about bashers, which is the army word for these sloping tarpaulins. You can rig it up in 2 minutes, it keeps you dry in pouring rain, and they're fantastic things for just trying out camping. And actually a perfect thing to do now that I wrote about in my Microventures book but feels extra relevant now is just sleeping in your garden. A lot of people would like the idea of sleeping in the woods but are perhaps nervous to do it or find it hard, or you live in a town. And therefore I suggest just sleeping in your garden, or as I did when I lived in a third floor flat, just sleep on the balcony flat. You still get a large percentage of the experience of being out in the wilderness. You see the stars, the moon, you feel the wind, you hear the birds song. You get a sense of being out in nature, out in wilderness, even though you're just outside. And the bonus, of course, is that if it really starts raining, you can just go inside to bed. So I really recommend sleeping in the garden. I know a load of kids are doing this at the moment, but I really recommend it as a fun thing for adults to do as well. Does anyone have any questions in the last few minutes that I might be able to help, or better still, delegate to this fantastic helpful comment stream that we might be able to find answers to? So if you've got any questions, put them in the comments, please. Does micro-adventuring require a specific mindset? Yes, I think a mindset is the key thing to micro-adventures, and perhaps actually the key to lockdown, really. And in my mind, the two have been helpfully intertwined as to being about looking for the opportunities that exist rather than bemoaning all the stuff you can't do. So I'd love to go and cycle across Mongolia right now, but I can't. So I can either be sad about that, or I can get excited about cycling to my friend's house, or coming up with some daft little excuse to go from one place to deliver a cup of tea to a granny or something. So trying to find opportunities rather than constraints. And what I would say to you is, if you want to do a microventure but you're put off, you think, oh, it's too hard or difficult or scary or whatever, find a smaller version and keep finding it smaller and smaller until there's something that grabs you enough to think, yes, I can overcome my worries, my nervousness, my lack of expertise, and just do something. Because once you've done a little one, I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it, and then it'll give you a bit of momentum and confidence to do something a little bit bigger next time. Alex says, do you ever use a hammock? Okay, I like using a hammock. The problem with England is that we chop down most of our trees. So I don't like to rely, when I'm off on journeys, I don't like to have to rely on being able to find 2 trees this far apart in an evening. So I never really rely on them on trips. But if I'm going specifically to, say, some woods, then yeah, occasionally I do enjoy being in a hammock. When I really enjoy a hammock is in winter, when it's pouring with rain and the ground is soaked and you put a tarpaulin over the hammock. I much prefer that to a bivvy bag. In the summertime, I prefer being in a bivvy bag on the ground. I find it more comfortable. Tom says, how do you secure your bike overnight? Generally, I try and make sure that where I'm sleeping overnight, bad guys don't know that I'm there. So I'm nicely concealed somewhere. And if I'm worried about the security of my bike, I kind of feel I should not be sleeping there, and I should be sleeping somewhere a bit more covert. So I generally just try to go for that approach. Having said that, I do have a tiny little bike lock, a little wire pull-out job, which is tiny, and you could quite easily get rid of it with some wire snippers, but that will deter most random walk-by thieves, I suspect. When I was cycling around the world, I used to fix my bike to my tent at night, so that hopefully the yank would at least wake me up a little bit. Nicola found a new brewery. So, Nicola, did you find a brewery by cycle paths, or did you find bravery? Whether you found a brewery or bravery, I think exploring the local cycle paths has been good. Cycle paths, actually, that reminds me to go look up Sustrans on for where you live, and you'll be able to find some local bike routes for that as well. Advice on finding adventures in the countryside versus the city. Yeah, if you live in the beautiful Lake District now, or the mountains of Utah, then of course you having probably a whale of a time in some ways in lockdown, and that nature is out there. If you're living somewhere a bit more concrete, then it requires a bit of imagination. But as we know, nature's really been coming out during lockdown. My nighttime runs around the streets, I've been seeing so many bats. Love the bats and foxes. And smelling the hawthorns. So I think it's, again, comes down to a bit of a mindset that you can definitely be an explorer in your city and find beautiful things in the city. Chris Packham was talking on Six Music Radio this morning about birds that you can hear and so-called wasteland in cities. But I think just anything you can do really to get outdoors is always important for our physical health, but right now, for the nation's mental health, to stop us going totally and utterly bonkers, I think we all need to spend a little bit of time riding our bikes till we're sweaty and exhausted, and spending a little bit of time sitting silently under a tree trying to learn the sounds of a couple more birds. There's absolutely no doubt that if you're feeling so frazzled, like you can't possibly cope with all of this, that, not to belittle issues, but climbing a tree is pretty good for these sort of things, I feel. Best tips for finding microventures getting out of cities. Well, what you certainly don't need to do at the moment is just go on a microventure that's going to be where every other person is going. So it's a perfect opportunity to just go to random places. Another thing I did in my microventures book I forgot about was I got a map of an area where I was, and I closed my eyes and I went pointed to a random place on the map, and then my mission was to get from where I was to that random point, a totally arbitrary point, but by having some sort of a mission, it gave me some sort of purpose to get me to that place. All you need is an excuse to get yourself out of the front door and take the first step, as Bruce Springsteen said. Are there any apps that identify birds from their songs? I need this. I'm so terrible at finding bird songs. I'm not even going to... Sorry, I was about to start going through my emails to find you the answer to that. But there are a few birdsong apps. They're not brilliant. There's one called BirdNet. But they are understandably pretty tricky technology. Someone asked me about my Scout Necker here. The Scout... I can't... There, my Scout Necker. The Scouts are wonderful for trying to get young people into the outdoors. I'm not a Scout. I was a Cub as a kid. But I do a tiny bit of helping in terms of just trying to boost some of the things they do on social media and post occasional videos encouraging young people to do some of the scouting activities. I love what the Scouts do. I think that's Bear Grylls' greatest legacy, is making scouting seriously popular. Right. Julian says, I agree about the benefit of riding a bike until we're sweaty. I'm just back from the ride. I'm sorry I missed the start. Well, Julian, the start of this was brilliant. Degenerated ever since. But talking about sweatiness, I'm now so sweaty in my shed that I'm going to have to get out of here. So, and besides, who wants to be listening to me when you can all hopefully now have some ideas to go climb some trees? I would love to hear from you via whatever social media platforms you use. Twitter's the one I do the most answering on, of adventures that you come up with. If you look on my website, alistairhumphreys.com, and on the Microventures section of that, there's loads of ideas that I hope will give you ideas of things that you can try and do close to home. What else should I say? Oh yeah, Facebook. There's a group called Adventure Queens. If you're a woman looking to join groups of women getting out having microadventures. Anything else I should say? Dun 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 dun. Grinding to a spectacular halt. I think we're done. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed this random monologue and the very comprehensive comment section. So if you've just joined, have a scroll through the comments. There's plenty of good links of things to go and do on there. Go plan some fantastic microadventures, and of course you should buy all of your North Face gear in Cotswold Outdoor and go climb a tree. Thanks very much, everyone, and good luck to all of you in whatever's going on right now. Cheers. Oh, hang on. Hazel says, I'm planning a barefoot coast-to-coast adventure with I need a live GPS tracker. You need to speak to Anna McNuff, who ran Barefoot through Britain. She will be able to answer your Barefoot Britain question. Right. I am going to have a cup of tea. Can you share... This is a terrible ending. Julian says, can you share a link of where I can watch from the start? This will all be on the Cotswold Outdoor Facebook page. It takes some sort of processing time. And then I will be putting it up on my Facebook pages as well. A great site for bird songs. Oh yeah, that xenocanto.org is really good. Also, the RSPB website is really good for bird song identifying. Wow, ending on a whimper. Thank you very much. Have a very good evening, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you.